Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Halestone here again, and today we have another reaction video that I'm going to be looking at. This video has actually been recommended to me by a number of people who watch my channel, and I'm really excited to learn about it. It's a video from Timeline. It says, what does it take to earn the British Medal of Honor, the Victoria Cross, and I'm really excited for this. I know quite a bit, obviously, about our American Medal of Honor. No surprise there. I might still put a video out about that some other time. But I am excited to learn more about the Victoria Cross, which is obviously our British counterpart to that medal. And so I'm not even going to hesitate. Let's just hop into it. And I will probably break this video up into two parts, mostly because the video itself is an hour long. And I don't really want to upload an hour-long video just yet. So we're probably going to do two parts. So keep an eye out for part two. Let's get into part one.
In September of 1944, the Allied armies were advancing fast towards Germany. But a huge obstacle stood in their way: the River Rhine. An audacious plan to capture 8 of the bridges across it in one fell swoop started well. But everything went disastrously wrong with the final quarry: the bridge at Arnhem. 12,000 airborne troops came by glider and parachute to fight for the bridge. It was the biggest airborne assault ever.
Wow, that's actually pretty interesting. And now that I'm seeing this, I'm wondering if I've seen a movie about this, because that's sounding awfully familiar about that bridge and all the gliders and parachutists that came in. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And on a side note, for my own personal life, I'm hoping to get a slot into airborne school this summer, and hopefully I can hop out of a couple of airplanes myself. That would be nice.
But it didn't work. In fact, it would turn out to be one of the biggest disasters in the entire war. Of the 12,000 men who came here, only 3,900 got out again. However, the battle produced some of the most astonishing feats of bravery in British military history. One of the men fighting here was Major Robert Kane of the South Staffordshire Regiment. He arrived in the war zone by glider on September the 18th, just another ordinary man who'd given up his ordinary job to fight in the war. But 10 days after his glider landed in this very field, this ordinary man would have done something extraordinary. He would have won the world's highest award for...
Oh, real quick, and I might say this a couple of times during this video, it's always so interesting to see modern day battlefields, like what they look like now. And it's so strange to think that, 40, 50 years ago, there were bombs dropping, airplanes flying overhead, soldiers camping out there. That's just strange. And I've had the privilege to go to a couple of battlefields in my life. And it's always so interesting to realize just how peaceful the area is without all the other stuff that goes on there, or went on there, I should say. But I don't know, just a side tangent I always think is interesting.
Valor, the Victoria Cross.
Here it is.
It is almost impossible to win a VC. In the 150 years since it was created, the number of British and Commonwealth troops who've seen action is in the tens of millions. But only 1,351 of them have been awarded the Victoria Cross.
Wow, so obviously a very prestigious medal, and I think it obviously should be that way. Medals like the Medal of Honor and the Victoria Cross, they're like reserved for the absolute top notch. Like, not to say what other soldiers do isn't worthy of medals, and they do get medals, but those two in particular, it's like a whole different level.
The chances of surviving a VC action are just 1 in 10, but if you do survive, the medal can never be taken away from you.
And it's about the same with the Medal of Honor. Most of them are awarded to soldiers who died performing their action and their valor. Very rarely do they survive actually getting the medal.
You can go to the gallows wearing it. And no matter how many letters you have after your name, VC always comes
Okay,
first.
now I'm sorry I'm stopping so much. It's very interesting that in British, I don't know, culture, the way they do things, and tell me if it's still like that. I noticed that in some names you get those, he was talking about them, letters after your names that I think denote your rank, maybe in like the military or titles you've earned. Somebody, could you please explain that to me? Because that's something that's very interesting to me. We don't have that where you have like extra letters and stuff after your name, and it's so somebody tell me about it if you know about it.
The VC, to my mind, has a place above all other national awards. It is the highest regarded award for gallantry. People have it in their minds that the Victoria Cross is something special, and anybody who's got the Victoria Cross must be somebody special. And they're right.
I could have centered this program on any VC winner. All of them are remarkable. But the most special for me is this man, Robert Kane. This then is his story, but it's also the story of the medal that he won. In official speak, the military say the Victoria Cross is awarded only for gallantry of the highest order. But what does that mean? Well, let me give you a typical example. This is the story of Lieutenant Ferdinand West, an RAF pilot who won his VC in the First World War. On August the 10th, 1918, West was flying his biplane far over the enemy lines when he was attacked by 7 German aircraft. At the start of the fight, one of his legs was blown off by an explosive bullet and fell into the controls. West lifted his leg clear of the controls and, although wounded in the other leg, manoeuvred his machine so that his rear gunner was able to get several good bursts into the enemy aircraft and drive them off. All 7 of them. Through sheer grit and determination, West then landed his plane safely, and although rapidly weakening and semi-conscious from the loss of blood, insisted on filing his report on the enemy troop positions before receiving medical attention. And the extraordinary thing is, the report here filed by his rear gunner said that he didn't know that the pilot had been wounded until after they landed. West never thought to mention that his leg had been blown off.
Wow, that is, I don't know, beyond impressive, that level of dedication and commitment, and just, I don't know, there's not really words that can describe it. At least I'm not good enough to think of words that can describe, you know, the type of quality person that has to be willing to do that. I don't know, that's just, that's insane.
The story of the VC began 150 years ago when Britain was in the thick of another empire-building dust-up, the Crimean War. There was huge bravery, but the system for rewarding this gallantry was a shambles. The medals that did exist were only for officers of a certain rank. There was nothing for the common man. Sometimes an ordinary soldier would be mentioned in dispatches, but that was no good because army commanders tended to list everyone who'd taken part.
Right, and that is something that I've noticed that happens, and I'm happy that it changed. It's definitely changed that, I don't know, medals recognition used to be reserved for officers, and I don't think that's particularly right because I feel as though the enlisted people are the real muscle and backbone of a military. And I'm saying this from the perspective of somebody who is going to be an officer in a few years. Yeah, I just say that.
It was a bit like passing your chartered accountancy exams today. You get your name in the paper, but so does everyone else. The Crimean conflict, however, saw the advent of a new weapon to fight the cause of the foot soldier, the war correspondent. One of them was William Howard Russell from the Times. His stories from the front line meant that for the first time, people back home could read accounts about the immense bravery of the bloke next door. One of the people who read these reports was Captain Thomas Scoble, an MP, who proposed a motion in the Commons on December the 19th, 1854, that the Queen should create some kind of medal, an order of merit, he said, for distinguished and prominent personal gallantry, to which every grade and individual, from the highest to the lowest, may be admissible. Unfortunately, the idea met with strong resistance from army commanders. They argued that the success of the British Army was based on the discipline of its formations, and they didn't want a medal that recognised individual acts of heroism in case it encouraged soldiers to break ranks and disappear off on their own.
I mean, I guess I could see where they're coming from with that. I don't agree with that. I think it's the wrong attitude to take, but I could see where they would get that idea from.
However, the top brass was about to be outgunned. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert saw the sense of Scoble's idea and told the War Office to come up with a plan. Not being terribly adventurous or enthusiastic, the civil servant suggested something traditional. An ancient order of some kind, perhaps. This is the document that they prepared. And as you can see from the notes and the squiggles put on it by Prince Albert, he was less than impressed. You can see here he's crossed out this bit where it refers to the order because he didn't want it to be seen like joining a Masonic lodge. Here in the margin, look, he's actually referred to it as a cross granted for distinguished service, which will make it simple and intelligible. That is very forward-thinking for the time. And here, he even suggests a name for it. The Victoria Cross.
Another side note, I'm sorry I'm making so many side notes. I need to do a video on Queen Victoria just herself at some point.
Nearly 100 years after Prince Albert wrote those words, Major Robert Kane was preparing to go into battle at Arnhem. He was no career soldier, just an oil company executive from the Isle of Man. So, what sort of chap was he?
He was very kind and he had a great sense of humour. I used to drink in the bar. He always bought the drinks.
Well, my strongest memory is that you hadn't got to be frightened of him. That you could go to him and speak to him of anything.
I would personally, if I'd been asked to follow anyone, I'd have followed Robert Kane. I had complete confidence in men.
The battle plan that brought Kane to Arnhem was called Operation Market Garden, and it was very simple. Allied forces would parachute into Holland and seize a line of strategic bridges. This would create a highway that would allow the Second Army to charge north, over the enemy defence lines, and down into Germany itself. The war, it was said, would be over in a matter of weeks. Now, the most
Of course, we know it wasn't over in a matter of weeks.
difficult bridge to capture would be the one furthest north in the Dutch city of Arnhem. But a small band of British paratroopers from the first wave of landings did manage to capture the north end of what's now known as the Bridge Too Far. Major Kane arrived in this field 24 hours after the first landings. There'd been a problem with his glider back in England, but his job remained the same. He had to get his company of 22 men to the bridge as fast as possible to help out. Sounds simple, but it wasn't. First of all, the whole point of airborne troops is surprise. You don't know they're coming until they're there. But because Kane arrived 24 hours after the first wave, the surprise was gone. And to make matters worse, the landing zone was some 8 miles from the bridge. So, thanks to some incompetent planning from the top brass in England, the Germans knew that Kane and his men were coming, they knew where he'd landed, they knew where he was going, and they had the wherewithal to do something about it. By sheer coincidence, the German army had parked 2 divisions just outside Arnhem. That meant tanks, artillery guns, half-tracks, and 12,000 SS Panzer troops. Lined up against this wall of armour was the airborne British soldier who, by the nature of his job, travelled light. He only had a Sten gun or rifle, knives, grenades, only a few anti-tank weapons were brought because no one thought they'd be needed.
That is very interesting compared to the American airborne troops, which notoriously carried a ridiculous amount of gear on them when they jumped.
The British troops simply didn't know about the strength of the German opposition as they started out on the 8-mile walk to the bridge. Kane's men made it with no real problems at all to this very spot, just 2,000 yards from the bridge. They could actually see it over there, and they could almost certainly hear the small company of British soldiers fighting to hold on to the northern end. But they couldn't get there. The Germans had had all the time in the world to get ready, and they were ready. Down there, on the other side of the river, they had artillery. On the other side, up there behind that modern building, there's a piece of high ground. They'd put mortars on that. Dead ahead were tanks and infantry. In desperation, some of the British tried to run down this bank, but there were more tanks and more infantry down there on the lower road. This was the perfect place for an ambush. The British had walked right into it, and they were slaughtered.
Alright, so I actually think that we're going to cut this video off here and finish up his story in the next video. But I want to talk quickly about how, I don't know, seeing those pictures of how that area in that little city looked during the war and how it looked today, with all the cars just driving by and people on bicycles and things peaceful and quiet. It's just such a surreal thing to see that, you know, like I said, 70 years ago, people were killing each other and artillery was going off, and it's so strange. And maybe it's strange to me as an American because the only place where we have those battlefields where things are different today is over on the East Coast, and obviously I'm in the middle of the desert in the western part of the U.S., and we don't have any places like that because the U.S. has only been invaded that one time in 1812. Other than that, it was our Civil War, and I've been able to visit those battlefields. Other than that, we don't have that type of stuff. So very interesting stuff. I'm excited to continue watching. Sorry if I paused this at a bad spot, but I wanted to be able to really enjoy the story, but I have to end this video here. We'll continue off hopefully soon. As soon as I get a chance to sit back down for another 20 or 30 minutes, I'll put out part 2, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time.